What do the stats of fantasy basketball have to say about the Jazz stars? Are they going to star in fantasy basketball, and are they going to star in real life? We brought in Josh Lloyd to answer that for your Utah Jazz.
You are Locked On Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome into Locked On Jazz. My name's Leif Thulin. I'm excited to be back with you, filling in for David Locke for the last week of this stint on Locked On Jazz. Most of you guys know by now I'm a lifelong Jazz fan, credentialed NBA draft analyst, attendee of the 23 and 24 NBA Combines, Jazz broadcast assistant, and statistician, lover of college hoops. So I'll make sure you know what you need to know about your beloved Utah Jazz. Today I'm joined by Josh Lloyd of Locked On Fantasy Basketball. And we're going to talk about projections for the Utah Jazz. And before we get to that, thank you guys for making Locked On Jazz your first listen each and every day. Remember, Locked On Jazz is free and available on all platforms, including YouTube at Locked On Jazz, where the best way to help us grow is to comment anything below. And today's question is a simple one for all of you guys. Which player do you think is the most likely to be a pleasant surprise, both in the fantasy basketball realm, but also on your Utah Jazz? And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Football season is just around the corner, so visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your future bets now. So, like I said, today on the show, I brought in Locked On Fantasy Basketball's own Josh Lloyd. He and I have done a couple episodes over the years projecting rookies. We'll talk about the rookies. We're going to talk about the stars of the Jazz. Thank you for joining me, Josh.
Not a problem, Leif. It's good to be here. It's good to talk about this team. I actually just got, last week I was speaking to our boss, David, about the Jazz on my show and trying to figure out some of this stuff. So it's a nice little sort of backup, just a secondary look at the Jazz from your perspective now.
Yeah, so my contention, I've told the Jazz fans for the last month when I filled in for David, is essentially I did a show of who's going to be the MVP, the Defensive Player of the Year. I did like a little award show for the NBA, but for the Utah Jazz, and who has the best chance of actually contending for those awards. And then I thought about it from the perspective, okay, what are the statistics that I assume these guys will get in order to, have cases for said awards? So let's start with the Jazz's best player, the one I anointed the MVP. That's Lauri Markkanen as it stands. I mean, if he's not the best player, either Ace Bailey is otherworldly, and that's the best case scenario, or Walker Kessler is taking a huge leap. Like that, those are the two scenarios. But my projections for Lauri Markkanen are about 22 points per game, 8 rebounds per game, and that's up from last year's 19 and 6. So what does that projection look like in your mind? Does that seem too optimistic, or is that lower than your anticipation? Because the 2 years prior with the Jazz, Lauri was higher than those numbers.
It's sort of in the middle because I was really interested to see how you were going to look at this because obviously his season wasn't particularly strong last season. I've got him at 22 points as well, but I don't have the rebounds bouncing back up. His rebound numbers continued to fall as the season went on. And given, I know John Collins isn't there, but we're going to talk about Walker Kessler and there's Kyle Filipowski and then Taylor Hendricks is there and they brought in Yusuf Nurkic. Like how much is Lauri going to play the 4 or the 5, honestly, this season? Is he going to be just doing more perimeter stuff? So I haven't got the rebounds bouncing back to that level they were when he was at 8 and 8.5. Those first 2 seasons in Utah, they were pretty far down last season, and I think they might sort of stay in that 5.5 to 6 zone.
I think that's possible. So I had that as a follow-up question. Am I too high on rebounds? Is the exact next question I have in my notes. But here's my reason for why I think it'll be 8. I think the Jazz last season were one of the best. In fact, I know they're one of the best offensive rebounding teams per the numbers. My assumption is because they're so poor defensively, and I don't think they're going to take an enormous leap there, that there will be an effort put on the offensive glass, and that means sending more bodies. And so Walker Kessler is going to be the main beneficiary of those rebounds. He actually was the number 1 offensive rebounder in NBA last year. But I think there's going to be more Lauri Markkanen offensive rebounds than that of Kyle Filipowski or Taylor Hendricks. And so I kind of factored in the Jazz struggle in defense. What's the best way to limit defensive possessions is play more offense. And so I figured maybe you'd get an extra offensive rebounder to a game and the Jazz play more possessions. So I agree with you that he's going to be sharing reps with a lot of bigger bodies, even with the loss of Collins. So I do respect that thought. And that was my next point. But do you think there's any possibility of the offensive reboundings of Walker Kessler and Lauri Markkanen kind of being splitting the share and ending up being a 8 rebound type of guy?
I mean, look, anything's really possible. There's so many different options of the way they can run that. Those rotations, and if they want, I guess some of it's going to depend also on what level of rebounding or what sort of role they put for Ace Bailey, because if he's going to be out there on the court and he's doing more perimeter stuff and it's pushing Lauri bigger a little bit more, that changes that sort of idea. Of course, when Collins and Kessler are on the court, you know that those two are going to be hyper focused on rebounding. Like Bailey's not the level of rebounder that Collins is, even though there's probably a little bit more depth in the front court overall. That's probably going to have an impact there. If I had to look at my number sits at like 5.5 or 6 around that mark. If I had to look at it, and if I am looking at it right now, right, and say, is it likely that it goes under that, or is it likely to more likely to go to 7? It's more likely to go back to 7 than it is to be worse than those sort of projected numbers. But I'm just, the way that I do the projections, what I'm projecting everyone, I project every single player in the NBA. We look at the teams and the totals and minutes and games played, and we try to make sure that it all balances out. So I'm looking at the total rebounds I've got set for the Jazz, and I've got a pretty high number. So I go, how much further do I push Lauri on that, given when you look at all these players who are going to be out there and grabbing rebounds? I do find it hard to think that those previous numbers come back, but we see fluctuations of this stuff all the time.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think largely we're splitting hairs. The more important one to me is the points, that they're jumping back up 3 points per game. What do you have as kind of projections for his efficiency? Because that's what dipped last year more so than the volume. If the volumes dipped slightly, but the efficiency dipped more drastically. So do you see any bouncing back in that department?
Yeah, like his usage was the same the last 2 seasons. Basically, it was like right on 24. I've got his usage jumping up slightly this season with the absence of Clarkson and Sexton. In terms of efficiency, let me just have a look at the numbers there. I've got it jumping back a pretty significant amount. He'd been over 63 true shooting for the 2 previous seasons. I've got him back at around 60% true shooting, up 38% from 3. I don't think that 34% shooting from 3 is a realistic thing to expect that Mark. If he can't shoot, what's he doing, right? So he's not useful, right? If he's shooting at a well below league average level, he's not a useful player. So I think that number, I've bumped that up to like 38 plus, and putting his true shooting back over 60. So I think we're going to have a pretty sizable efficiency jump, hopefully this season.
Well, you and I got there very different ways, but our numbers are pretty much identical. I had 38.5% on 3-point shooting. I have his field goal around 47.5. So I'm assuming we're pretty comparable there.
Yeah, I got him at 46 on the field goals. I've just got the scoring getting to 22 just by a little bit of a jump in the usage rate.
All right, so Lauri Markkanen projected to move up in terms of his stats. A guy who had a great third year after a sophomore slump was Walker Kessler. So let's talk Walker Kessler. My projections I'll lay out here and see what you're thinking. So last year, Walker was really good. He averaged 11 points, 12 rebounds. I've got him averaging 12 points, 13 rebounds in year 4.
What did you say, 12 and 13?
Yep.
I've got him at 13 and 12. So yeah, it's pretty close. I've got the rebounds at about a similar number to where they were. I've got the scoring going up slightly this season because we saw at the end of last season where he was just decided that he was jacking three threes a game, that like his overall efficiency numbers dropped pretty considerably. And I don't think that's going to be a thing. Like he had a true shooting over the last month of 40%. Like I don't think that's going to be something that happens for a big chunk of next season. So I've got his efficiency jumping back up, pushing his scoring. I've actually got him almost closer to 14 points, like 13 and a half with 12 boards. So it is an improvement there. And I just think we get a little bit of that efficiency, which is dropped off last season for some of those specific reasons that we talked about.
Yeah, my logic as to why he jumps in terms of rebounds was essentially John Collins, I think, is a better rebounder than Kyle Filipowski, and he'll share more of those minutes in that lineup as opposed to like the Nurkic minutes. They won't play together. So once again, pretty similar there, coming at it totally differently. This is eye test, knowing the rotations, and yours is largely analytical. Of course, you know the players as well. What do you think in terms of Walker Kessler's growth? Like, what is the ceiling down the road at his peak with the Utah Jazz, whatever age that is? What do you think his statistical peak will be?
It's a good question because he's one of these guys where he comes in, he has an impact straight away as a rookie. His second season was a little bit of a disappointment, but I think that the disappointment in year 2 for Kessler was a lot of it was people expecting a bigger jump than what happened. It wasn't that he got necessarily significantly worse. There was a lot of weird stuff going on with that team. Obviously, it was more like, hey, he didn't step forward. And then last season he did. But like, I look at what he does and the way that he plays it, and I'm not really sure what the next level can be. Not to say that he's never going to get better, but is 15 and 12 the best we ever get? Like maybe. Like, does he start adding in something with some passing. There were some flashes of passing. You'd remember this from his college days, where there was some time to go, maybe he can pass a little bit. That hasn't developed at all really in the NBA. So I'm not sure, like, can he ever handle a load of more than 30 minutes a game? Does he get to 34? I doubt that. Is he ever going to be a 17, 18 usage player? I also doubt that he gets to that. I think it just comes down to he becomes more impactful defensively, if that's possible, because it's not always just about blocking shots. It's about, space and where you are and screen navigate, all that sort of stuff. And what happens if you get pulled out? How do you work on that sort of stuff? Whereas the statistical numbers, like, I'm not sure that it gets better than 15 and 12 from a raw just points rebounds type number.
Yeah, 15 and 12 is about the ceiling that I see as well. I've outlined that for in prior episodes and also a future episode that I've started to plan out. So you and I once again see things pretty similarly. This is where we could deviate. Coming up next, we're going to talk about the breakout star for the Jazz, someone who numerically has better numbers, but also someone that you think will have a bigger impact on the Jazz than many Jazz fans may, as we're so used to our team. Maybe the outside perspective will enlighten you to something new. All that and more coming straight ahead on Locked On Jazz. If you're running a business, you know that every missed call is money left on the table. Think about the last time you had to have an urgent need. You didn't want to wait. Maybe a plumber or a service provider. If the first person didn't answer, you didn't wait. Of course you didn't. You moved on. That's why you need Open Phone. Open Phone's the #1 business phone system built to streamline and scale your customer communications, all from an app on your phone or your computer. Open Phone lets me manage business calls and texts from a single app. The shared inbox is a game changer. Absolute game changer. You can jump into any conversation instantly without missing a beat. Open Phone is offering the listeners of Locked On Jazz 20% off your first 6 months at openphone.com/LockedOnNBA. That's OpenPhone.com/LockedOnNBA. And if you have existing numbers with another service, Open Phone will port them over at no extra charge. That's Open Phone. No missed calls, no missed customers. And I also want to tell you guys about Murdoch Hyundai. Murdoch's, they've been in Utah for over 80 years. Hyundai is the best car for your money. They got safety features, bells, whistles, all in amazing cars for amazing prices. The SUV lineup, you guys know this well, but they've got the Kona, the Tucson, the Santa Fe, and the Palisade. I've driven the Tucson, really liked it. And when you turn the blinker on, if you want to go left, all of a sudden it illuminates what's to your left, just in front of the steering wheel, so you don't have to deviate your eyes at all. And they also have electric cars. The new Ioniq 6 is amazing. It's sleek, electric, looks like a Porsche, and just won the World Car of the Year. And there are 3 locations, so whatever is nearest to you: Linden, Murray, and Logan. I've been to the one in Murray, and the guy took great care of me and knew, hey, you're Leif from Locked On Jazz. That made me feel great. But certainly tell them you listen to Locked On Jazz, and they'll give you great care just like they would anyone else. So go check out Murdoch Hyundai. All righty, welcome back to Locked On Jazz. Leif Thulin with you here, joined by Josh Lloyd, kind enough to join us from the land down under in Australia. He is the fantasy basketball guru for Locked On Fantasy Basketball, and I've tasked him with coming up, and we didn't talk about this, with a guy who is going to break out for the Jazz, whether it's based on his system of the statistics of how he projects for everyone, or just eye test. I don't know exactly his method, but Josh, I'll turn it over to you. Who is the player to watch out for Jazz fans to have a better season than advertised?
Okay, so I was sort of sitting on this one a little bit and thinking about it for the last few weeks. And then I spoke with David last week, and then he put the idea, not put the idea into my head, but he sort of just confirmed that I'm going to go with a little bit here. I think we're going to see a bit from Brice Sensabaugh this season. I hope, like, he's been an elite shooter the last couple of seasons. I think that he added, like, the defense is a problem, obviously, but I just think that he, with the removal from the team of Sexton and Clarkson, opening up those spots, if this guy is a 40% plus shooter, a decent level usage scorer who's got some passing ability, who's got some heft and some size, I think that there is just something about him that could fit really nicely in this sort of situation, especially if like the shooting of, say, an Isaiah Collier, which is terrible last season, if that never comes along, we have to get more shooting into these lineups. He's a name that, again, I don't think many Jazz people or outside Jazz people would be thinking about as someone who could sneak his way in and even be a starter for this team. But I think Brice Sensabaugh is sort of primed. He's in heading into year 3, his first season. There's a lot of knee problems that were a part of it. He's just someone that there just seems to be a little bit coalescing around where he is and what he can bring. And I do think we're going to see a little bit of, okay, he can do that sort of a season.
Yeah, I was interested in seeing where you went with that question because I think there are two that are more prominently discussed. But in my notes, I wrote in, does a guy like Brice Sensabaugh get into this conversation in case you did not mention him? My logic for him is essentially he's the best shooter on the team. Like Lauri Markkanen regressed to 34%. I still would take Lauri as the better scorer and better shooter and because of what he can do aside from shooting. But Brice Sensabaugh can really, really shoot the ball. For about the second half of the season, I want to say from All-Star break onward, Brice Sensabaugh on catch and shoot shot 48% from 3 last year. So
he shot 50%. He shot 50% from 3 for the last 16 games of the year.
Yeah, and so even a slightly smaller sample size, but even a better number. Like if you were to look at what he did for the last 4 months of the season, I think you'd be surprised. The average fan would say, "Hey, look, that's 43% from 3." And that's really good because he actually shot a lot of them. In the summer league, you watch it up close and personal. Many of the Jazz fans, I was there. You see, he was he's too good to be in summer league level, and that's really something. My one question for you would be, how many minutes do you project for him per game? Because I think the Jazz need to start Ace Bailey. I've been very outspoken about that on Locked On Jazz, and if the Jazz start Ace Bailey at the 2, which is my preferred spot, where does Brice Sensabaugh get his minutes?
Well, this is going to be the thing, isn't it? This is part of the question I've had about this team is who starts? There's too many guys that sort of need minutes. I would think that they would, if they're doing it, it'd be like he'd be at the 2, and then you'd have Markkanen maybe at the 4 and Bailey at the 3, and then you have like Hendricks and Filipowski coming off the bench. I would think that to me, that to give the spacing of what's sensible and that shooting and that volume, what that provides, to give Bailey the freedom to play at the 3, to push Markkanen. And if that happens, of course, and Markkanen is playing the 4, then those rebound numbers we spoke about earlier jump up. But then you run into the situation with guys that we're going to talk about, like where does that leave Kyle Filipowski, who was obviously really good in summer league and played really well down the stretch last season. But I think if it is going to happen, it needs to be in that sort of alignment of a sensible Bailey, Markkanen 2, 3, 4.
So what are the numbers you have projected for Brice?
Well, with the projections, I've got to try and be realistic, right? I'm not projecting that he's playing 30 minutes tonight. I think there's a chance that he could come in and start and play 27. I've only got him at 24 minutes, which is higher than I'm going to guess most people have him. And I've got him at like 13 points with 3 threes and about 4 rebounds, which is, they're not fantastic numbers, but it's that when I do sort of a projection like that on someone that people aren't necessarily thinking about, it's more just, hey, put this name in your mind. Think about what he can do. I've got him at 24. There'll be games where he plays 30. He might only play 18, but he isn't an outside shot to be able to push ahead of other guys if shooting is going to be important. And that stretch that we saw last season, what we carried over to Summer League, the third-year breakout sort of scenario, it's just putting that idea out there that just don't discount what this guy can do. Even I'm only projecting him at 24 minutes, which is not a full starter's role by any means. But I do think there is a chance because as I've said with the Jazz, and I talked about this through the draft, they shouldn't go into any sort of situation and go, well, we're set. We've got Keyonte George. We're set at point guard. We've got Isaiah Collier. They shouldn't think of any of that. So they shouldn't come in and go, well, these guys are set and Sensable's got to be behind them. Like, if he's better than them, just play him. Like, they shouldn't be in this spot where someone is gifted roles and minutes based on what they've done so far, because I won't say that any of those guys have done enough to suggest that they should be untouchable in those areas.
I agree with you. And we've talked about that too. Best player available, regardless of positional need. I'm fully on board with that. So one position that I would say he's not been handed anything. He got a really good role as a rookie. Second year, there's a lot of people saying, well, he's not the point guard of our future. Third year, I think there is a role for him. That's Keyonte George. That's the breakout I have. I have the belief that he's going to be the second leading scorer on the Jazz. He's going to inherit that role that was shared by Jordan Clarkson and Colin Sexton, in the sense of, look, their job was to score the basketball, nothing more, nothing less. And I think that's going to be his role. And I see a leap. He's been pretty consistent at 16 points, poor efficiency around 39%, and his three-point shooting hovers around 34% over the 2 years, right? I think he's going to be at 18 and a half, 19 points per game, because there's just a lot of vacant scoring left open from the 2-guard position. And if you look at the 6 man, I would contend you look at the 6 men in the entire NBA, there's only 4 or 5 of those guys I think are better scorers. They might be better holistic basketball players, but there's not that many better scorers that are 6 men. And so I think he's primed to have a bigger year than many expect. So that was my breakout guy.
You think he's going to be the 6th man, do you?
I do. I think that's the role that best suits the Jazz's future. I think the Jazz should start Ace Bailey at the 2. And that's why I think it is the most likely that Keyonte sets in and settles in as a 6 man, which he finished the season as last year.
He did. He played 31 minutes a night in his 32 games coming off the bench. He started the final 3 games of the season, but obviously that doesn't count a huge amount. But he did score a lot last season. He was pretty good. I'm interested in him. I never really bought that he was a point guard when he came into the NBA. They pushed him into that role. He showed a lot in training camp of his rookie season, and he was given that role pretty early on. Didn't particularly work out super well, but a lot of injuries sort of set him back. I worry at times about some of the shot selection stuff. It's going to be interesting to see what he does. I've got him playing 30 minutes tonight, and I've got him as the Jazz second leading scorer as well, averaging 18 points, somehow exactly the same as what you've got there. How do you see his assist numbers for this season? Because he was at 5.6 last season, which was an increase from the rookie year. I've got him coming back a little bit this season, though.
I do too. I have him about 3.8 is what I've got. I think it
that's
dropped
very low.
I think it drops a lot because I think it's going to be a role where he is told, look, you're not going to start. And we're going to have Isaiah Collier start. The second unit's going to be Walter Clayton Jr. at the ball because we're going to be very intentional about who's doing what. And his job is simplified. I think part of his efficiency woes was because he had to balance in his head. Do I play, make, do I score? I think, he's a better shooter than what he demonstrated. And so I think the simply doing one thing out of, 2 or 3 that you have to do as a point guard. Now he's simplifying his role, playing the shooting guard. I think that helps him score. And I think his playmaking is going to be tertiary on his mind.
I've got it dropping not by that much. I've got it down under 5, pretty similar to say he's like rookie numbers, like around that 4.5 mark. But like this is something that when people listen to my show and watch my show or make comments on things, and they'll be like, "Oh, how come you don't have this guy doing this? And why isn't this guy doing this?" And my response is always, "All right, you played the 240 games, only 240 minutes in a game. How the hell do everyone that you're saying get enough minutes and then enough touches? Like, how does this happen?" I think that we might run into one of those problems with this team because there's, for a team that's like not good and is going to be bad again, there's just a lot of different guys that they just traded again for George Niang, but does he even play every night? Like, where does he fit into here? And then you've got Clayton, and then you've got Collier, then you've got George, and then you've got if Bailey's playing as a guard as well. So there's 4 guards right there. And then not even including Brice Sensabaugh. Like, how do the minutes work out? Like, it's going to be challenging for Will Hardy, I think, to figure that stuff out. So while I can say, well, maybe Sensabaugh breaks out, and you can be like, I think George is going to do this. And I'm basically in agreement with you on Keyonte. There's just a lot of other names. Like Walter Clayton, like, what is it? Does he play 20 minutes? Does he play 15 minutes? Like, where does it all fit? It's really tough to figure it all out. Now, injuries will open stuff up, and injuries will also open stuff up. But the way things currently stand, like, it's hard. It's hard to fit it all in.
I'm with you. So before we talk about Walter Clayton Jr. and Ace Bailey, that's the final segment. We're going to talk about the rookies. I want to ask you about Kyle Filipowski because I think he's the guy that is going to improve the most on from season 1 to season 2. Because he finished season 1 with a average in March of like 15-8, and in April 14-10, right? Like he was good in those spans, but there was no leverage to the game. 82 games is totally different. But my projections for him are about 14 points and 8 rebounds. Like I see a world where he starts. That's what I think should happen. I think Kyle Filipowski should start because I don't think Taylor Hendricks will be ready. And I also think Kyle Filipowski's earned the starting spot more so than Hendricks, even though Hendricks has more allure of like a more balanced lineup. So maybe just give me your like minutes projections, points, rebounds for Filipowski, because obviously we could talk about all the different iterations that the Jazz could play. But what's your expectation for a guy who had such a monstrous summer league?
Yeah, he was huge in summer league. I've got him only 24 minutes, but I just don't know. Like there's just so many different ways that this can go. Like I said, maybe Lauri's at the 4. Does Nurkic play at all? Is Hendricks? And I just spoke with David. It pulled him out of his vacation to talk about Taylor Hendricks. Said Hendricks is fine. He's ready to go. He said he looks massive. He's put on so much weight. He looks gigantic. And David was like, I think Hendricks might be one of the guys that is pushing for more minutes and filling that role. He goes, he looks like an absolute monster. So like, where does it all fit? Because Filipowski's offensively some really strong stuff. defensively, like there are some limitations with that. And then where do we fit? Like all of his like shot blocking numbers from college, just he barely blocked a shot until like the last week of the season. I think didn't he go a stage where he didn't block a shot for like 2 months or something, where he just wasn't doing anything defensively. I loved what he did, but again, it's like where do you fit it all in? I find it hard to get him but look, the numbers I've got him at, would you say 14 and 8? I've got him at 13 and 7. Like it's not that different, because I think that when he's out there, he's going to be efficient. He's going to get shots up, but there's just going to be a lot of those names, and a lot of it comes down to like if Taylor Hendricks isn't ready and they're easing him in and playing him 20 minutes a night, then it is way more for Filipowski to do. If they decide that Kevin Love and Yusuf Nurkic are gone and they're not playing, not that Love's going to play anyway, but if Nurkic isn't a part of it, they just get rid of him, then there's more minutes available there. But maybe Nurkic plays 12 minutes, 13 minutes. I don't know. There's a lot of different ways. Do you think Filipowski is strictly a 4?
Yes, because it would be the worst defender in the NBA at the 5. But that's not even being hyperbolic. Like that's just watching him play every single night for the last couple of years, including when he was at Duke. He played the 4 better than he played the 5 there. We got to move to the rookies here. I will part with this question for Filipowski. Do you think his assist number is higher or lower than that of Keyonte George? Because I think there's a world it's higher.
Let me have a look. What do I actually have him project? No, I have it. No, I have it much lower. That'd be a site. Like he's a good passer, and that's part of the appeal. Like I don't remember where you had Filipowski in the draft, but I had him pretty close to the lottery, I think. So I was surprised when he slipped.
I was low on him. I was lower on him because I thought his defense was woeful, and it has been, but his offense has made up for it.
He did a lot of different things in college, as you know. Like he was able to impact the game in many areas. We didn't really see the passing stuff as much, but like I wouldn't be shocked if he jumped up to 4, or maybe more 3.5. I've got him around 2.5 at the moment, so I don't think that he'll hit George's number. But it would be an interesting sort of change in the way that Will Hardy uses him.
See, that is why I think Keyonte George will be a little lower, because I think he'll have minutes with Filipowski and Clayton, and his job will be to score. Theirs will be to distribute. So there's our first real disagreement, even though our numbers are pretty similar. Coming up next, we're going to talk about the rookies. I'm curious to see what your expectations are for Walter Clayton Jr., who comes in at 22, versus Ace Bailey, who just turned 19 this month. All that and more straight ahead on Locked On Jazz. August 26th, when you guys listen to this, it's officially FanDuel Futures Day, a brand new holiday for football fans who live for bold predictions and preseason hunches. For just 24 hours, FanDuel is giving you deals on NFL season predictions. So whether you're calling for your MVP, eyeing a long shot division winner, or ready to crown your Super Bowl champ before week 1 even kicks off, this is your time. So take a flyer on the MVP race if you feel so inclined. How do you feel about Joe Burrow? He puts up incredible numbers. His defense should be slightly better to give him a few more wins. I like Joe Burrow as the MVP. Crown your champion in August if that's for you. I might look at the Chiefs, even though that may sound a bit boring. They got the best quarterback in football, and I like their chances to be the hunter as opposed to the hunted. And if you want one that's fun, parlay your division winner dark horses or favorites. So 2 I like are the Eagles in the NFC East and the Texans in the AFC South. Visit FanDuel, the app today, and start planning your future bets right now, because FanDuel Futures Day is one day and one day only. FanDuel, play your game. All righty, welcome back to Locked On Jazz. Leif Thulin with you here. We have an important request for you guys on Locked On. Locked On wants to hear from you. We've put together a survey to learn more about our listeners and make your favorite podcast even better. This is your chance to tell us what you like, what you don't like, and answer questions about our advertising. So go to lockedonpodcast.com/survey to get started. Everyone who completes the survey will be entered into a chance to win one of 10 $100 Amazon gift cards. Again, that's lockedonpodcast.com/survey. So if you can find the link in the show, and you can find the link in the show notes. So if you can do that, it would be much appreciated. And thank you guys for helping us out. Thank you once again to Josh Lloyd for joining us today. And we've had interestingly similar numbers from a very different perspective. Mine is purely spectating the game, loving my team, kind of anticipating the minutes and the roles. And our numbers have been pretty similar, and his are very analytically driven. So this is the one that's interesting, because the rookies are unknowns to me. They're unknowns to Josh in terms of what their role will be. I'm going to turn the floor over to you. Ace Bailey, what are your projections for Ace?
I've got him at about 15-5 with horrendous efficiency. I'm not sure anyone's going to be too surprised at that. Low defensive numbers, low assists. Not even hitting like a steal a game. Not hitting even maybe he doesn't even get to 2 assists a game. To be honest, I'm not sure how that's going to work. That's one of the big things. Is his passing just absolutely horrific and his vision terrible, or was that largely a product of the college team? But I've got him about 15-5 on pretty poor overall shooting numbers for this season. I think he's going to play around 30 minutes, and I think it's going to be one of those ones where maybe it starts a little bit lower and you're hitting 32 for the second half of the season and balances out around 30 overall.
Well, you and I are on the exact same playbook, like shockingly similar. So I've told all my listeners for 2 weeks, so everyone can say this is not hindsight. I am at 14, just over 14 points per game, 5.5 boards, an assist on 43% from the field. So it's probably higher than you have him. 36 from 3, 78 from the free throw line as shooting splits. And I also have made the caveat in my notes of I expect him to be around 12 points per game for the first 3 months of the season and 16 points per game the final 4. And the efficiency is going to suffer in the final 4. The first 3 months, I think he's going to get his feet wet and he's going to play what I've called the Tobias Harris role, in the sense of he's going to be off the ball and he'll be the open 3 shooter and he'll make those. But then when he's asked to be the number 1, elevating the scouting report in certain lineups, he's going to struggle in those. So we have very similar numbers there. I think our role definition seems similar based on the numbers. I'd be pretty happy as a Jazz fan. You probably have a lot of models more than me, but I decided to create my own model, and I compared him to similar guys that had similar pedigree through high school, through college, to the NBA, their early years. There was Michael Porter Jr., Brandon Miller, Brandon Ingram, Paul George, and I even did Kevin Durant just for fun. And Ace Bailey compares very favorably to all of them, except, of course, Kevin Durant. He's better than just about all of those in college. He's better in high school and all those numbers. And so I projected those rookie numbers from theirs. And it turns out that if he does that, he's on a pathway to stardom. It was essentially my take. Who knows if that's true, but like those are really good rookie numbers. And typically, I guess I could ask you, how many players with those type of numbers, so you're projected at 15-5 in their first year at 19 years old, turn out not to be very good players?
I don't know. That's a hard question to answer. Like, I think some of it's gonna depend on how it comes. Like, if he's averaging 20 a game in March and April because Markkanen's not playing and half the team is gone or whatever, I'll be like, yeah, okay, like whatever. I'd like to see that happen when games matter and teams take the team seriously. If he comes out and he's not shooting sub 40% through November, I'll be like, okay, that's better than I thought. So that gives us a strong building block, and let's see where this goes. If 15-5 is strong as a rookie, I'm not going to say that it's, but I'm more down on Ace than what others have been. I'm a little worried about some of the shot selection and vision stuff, even accounting for the quality of his teammates. But there are obviously outlier athletic traits and outlier skill pops that you go, okay, well, let's see where this goes. I'm not like, I think he's got very clear star upside, but I would say the chances of hitting it aren't super high. And I think if he came out and averaged 18 a game, I'd be like, okay, we're locked in here. This is incredibly impressive. 15, we'll see. To me, it's going to matter how it sort of materializes.
Yeah, I think the interesting part is the Jazz are going to be a lot worse than a lot of those other teams, those players I mentioned, their rookie team. But I think you'd be surprised at like how low the output was for a guy like Brandon Ingram, who they were the number 2 pick, the Lakers, and he comes in and he was sub 10 points. Michael Porter Jr., there was some more guys in front of him, but he was 9 points a game. His second year, he was 17 points a game. And so I think that there's a trajectory in which he goes, like I said, I have 14.5 and you had 15. You go from 14 to 18 and then to 21. And I think that's a possibility of an all-star. Out of curiosity, how did you feel about the Brandon Ingrams, the Brandon Millers of the world when they came in?
Did not particularly like Brandon. I can try and think back to Ingram. Didn't particularly like him, but definitely didn't like Miller a huge amount. I thought Miller would be a solid player. I thought the Paul George upside comparisons weren't. I didn't believe in those. I thought more like best case to me, you turn into a Chris Middleton type of player, which is a really good player, but it's not like a superstar sort of a guy. I thought there was a lot of some of the poor shot selection stuff and efficiency issues with him. And I'm not going to say that it's all been dispelled for me. Like, I think, again, he's in a weird team situation as well. And we just haven't seen him play a huge amount. So he's sort of been what I thought he was, I guess. But I'm trying to think back. I would say that at the start of the college season, I would have had Ace Bailey rated higher than I had Brandon Miller. And then probably by the end of the season, I had them in a relatively similar spot pre-draft.
Well, what's funny is I saw Brandon Miller play in high school, and I said he was the best high scorer in that class. Turns out, by both the NBA performance and college performance, I was right in that. I said he reminds me of Paul George before the season. Then I watched him play, and I said he's Danny Granger, if you want a pacer. And I said Danny Granger or Chris Middleton. So that was funny. That's why I was smiling when you said Middleton. And I wonder if when we did a podcast, I remember we talked about Brandon Miller. I wonder if I said that exact same thing. So that was funny. But let's talk about Walter Clayton Jr., who when he was a freshman, no one knew about him at Iona. But by the time he was a senior, everyone knew about him. They won the championship at Florida. There are a lot of Jazz fans with really high expectations. Many think he can be the point guard of the future. Tell me your both statistical expectations for Walter Clayton Jr., but also your just kind of long-term outlook on him.
My thing on all of this, Leif, is I probably said this to you when we've done draft previews things before, is it like I'm always going to have a level of skepticism about players who come in at an older age who also aren't particularly size. Like he's not big like Walter Clayton. I think he's a solid player. I think he's a good player. I think he's a rotational level player. But the reason that he is coming in, he's going to turn 23 during the season, is that you said like at 19 he was nowhere near good enough. At 20 he wasn't good enough. He wasn't someone that was being looked at like that in that sort of a play. And there is at times these myths of like, well, they're older, so they're NBA ready, and most of the time that's just not true. Like that's you saw believe he was college player of the year, Ochai Agbaji come in, and you would have seen him play for Utah. What is this guy doing? Like this is not star level player. This is not that sort of a guy. He came in at an older age and really struggled, and he was a bit better last season, obviously. But someone like Clayton, I think, looked good in summer league. I think he's a solid. I think he looks dependable. I'm just never going to have supremely high hopes on a guy of this sort of size and age profile with that level of like the college production comes when you're significantly older than everyone else. Now, I think my opinion on this will end up changing because of the way that college landscape is changing with NIL and all this sort of stuff, that I'll have to sort of reframe that. But I'm going to be somewhat skeptical, and I would say that if he becomes the point guard of the future, it would be an outlier outcome for him.
I agree with you. I've said that I think Collier's, that even though he had a dreadful summer league, I think he's the point guard of this season, probably the next, unless the Jazz were to draft Darren Peterson, who is an absolute stud. But my takeaway is the Jazz would be elated if he turns into the Peyton Pritchard, the Ty Jerome mold that other older veteran guards who've been success stories turn into that were late first-round picks. I don't necessarily guarantee that, but that's like what the high end outcome of this is, as opposed to the point guard of the future. So I also have been tempering expectations. I said about 6 points, 3 assists as my expectation on about 18 minutes. How's that feel for you?
I've actually got him a little bit higher in the minutes, but I think it's also going to be one of those ones where it pushes up later in the season. I've got him at 21 minutes and about 9 points with like 2.5 assists. And it's very like, he comes in as this reputation of a shooter, and he did all the stuff that he did in Florida. It's very rare for rookies to come in and be even above average as shooters, especially guys with track. We could just look at, like, if I look back at someone like Marcus Sass is a name that comes off the top of my head, a smaller guard who played for this high level college team. Who shot
his first and second year, and that was an outlier. That was my other comparison of those big name all American type veterans.
And he shot that, but like he was just like, he was invisible as a player. Like he doesn't do it. He doesn't sit there and go, wow, can't believe it's Marcus Sasser. You go like, okay, like he has an occasional good quarter here, and he's just can't really push his way in now. And that was on that 14-win Pistons team in his first season. So yeah, I'm just going to have low expectations on this sort of a player. Again, think he can be really solid, and he looks accomplished, and he seems like a really good player to have in your rotation. But if any player like this turns out to be better than a seventh man, it's a huge win. Like it's just a huge outcome over the course of their career, because you can find the guys that you talked about, these later players, Peyton Pritchard, that turn into these guys. But I could also say, like, okay, where's Malachi Flynn these days? Like he was another guy picked 29 as a point guard who came out older, and he scored 50 in a game, but like, and then didn't get a contract the next season. So there are so many of those examples both ways of that sort of player.
Well, we've been miraculously on brand. It's the exact same sentiment I've shared with the Jazz fans throughout. Thank you, Josh, for listening, and thanks you to the Jazz fans thank you, Josh, for joining. And thank you to the Jazz fans for listening, for making Locked On Jazz your first listen each and every day. For your second listen, find Locked On NBA podcast where there's no offseason. Doug, Matt, Hayes, and the crew keep you up to date on contract negotiations, rumors, and everything you need to be the most informed NBA fan. Find Locked On NBA on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And thank you once again for listening today. Thank you to Josh. Hope you guys enjoy, and let us know your expectations. I'm sure I'll go through the comments, and maybe I'll converse with Josh as the season goes along, because we've typically, when we've done episodes together, ended up on the same track more often than not. So maybe we're both crazy, but maybe we're onto something. So hope you guys enjoy, and I'll see you guys next time.